Om. Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Gajananam Mahakayam Vignarajam Vinayakam Vishvesham Vishvashaksham Ganeshayam Namo Namaha. Om Shrim Hrim Klim Ganeshwaraya Brahmasvarupaya Jarave Sarvasiddhi Pradeshaya Vigneshaya Namo Namaha. Om Sahanao Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vitvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Gurave Sarva Lokanam Visaje Babaroginaha Nidaye Sarva Vidyanam Sri Dakshina Murthaye Namaha. Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Sarveshwaraya Namo Namaha Vatpamastu. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sai Ram and welcome to the 10th session on the Upanishads. So far, we have looked at, the Vedic organogram from the Vedas, 4 perspectives of the 4 Vedas and how they are sectioned and intersectioned and where the Upanishads make their appearance. And then we looked at Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, then Chandogya Upanishad, then Taittiriya Upanishad, then Aitreya Upanishad, then Kaushitaki Upanishad, then Kena Upanishad, then Katha Upanishad, then Ishavasya Upanishad, and today, the 10th session, we are looking at Prashna Upanishad. Prashna Upanishad. I'll tell you what that is. Prashna Upanishad. Again, going back to the presumed date of Advent, we are looking at, as far as Prashna Upanishad is concerned, the first millennium BCE, at least. Again, it's a Mukhya Upanishad. It's one of the significant Upanishads. And the Veda to which it is attached to is Atharvana-veda, Atharvana-veda. And from the Vedas, there are 4 parts, right? It has got a linkage to something called Gopatha Brahmanaha of the Atharvana-veda. Okay. In terms of chapters, well, this particular Upanishad isn't about chapters. It consists of 6 primary questions to which answers have been given. Questions are asked by the pupils or the shishyas, and the answer is given by their guru, a person called Rishi Pipalada, right? Pipalada, Rishi, the Maharishi. Therefore, this Upanishad is attributed or dedicated to Rishi Pipalada. Pipalada. Pipalada Maharishi is the one who created or authored this version of the Upanishad, or Prashna Upanishad, right? So you might see in some later versions, commentators have said, there are 3 chapters and 6 short sections or 9 answers to 6 questions. But, in the main frame, there's 6 main questions, which has got 6 answers. That's the focus of this Upanishad. And the philosophy behind it is 2 things. Om, the power of Om, and Mukti. Mukti means liberation, right? And again, Shankara has commented quite extensively on this Upanishad. And as you know, every week I tell you what is the central focus or what's the central verse of each Upanishad that we look at. And this one was focused, is focused, and will always be focused on something called know thyself and know the purpose of your life. Know thyself and know the purpose of thy life. And hence, it is Prashna Upanishad, right? Prashna in Sanskrit means question, right? So the questions are meant to get you closer to yourself, your real self, your true self, your inner self, your natural self, right? So what's the structure like with regards to Prashna Upanishad? Well, as I said, it contains 6 questions and the answers to those 6 questions. Except for the first Prashna and the 6th Prashna, the first question and the 6th question, all other sections ask several questions or multiple questions to which, answers are given. But the primary question is always the primary question, from which, subsidiary questions may have been asked, with the exception of the first and the last of number 1 and number 6, right? And in the end of today's session, I'll tell you who are the 6 pupils or the Shishyas who ask the 6 questions to which sage Pipalada give a response. So the 6 students have been credited with raising the query or raising the question. And obviously Rishi Pipalada has been credited with giving the answers and writing this whole thing. Hence, it has been attributed or dedicated to him. Now, I must tell you that, doing the research and during the research, doing the research and during the research, I found the questions, sometimes when people ask questions, it appears to be sort of a random selection. But this particular one, the questions are not randomly arranged, but it seemed like there was an embedded structure behind the lineage of questions, So question 1 gently led into question 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And these pupils, were not sitting together and discussing what sort of questions they should ask. One just asked, and then the next one asks, and the next one asks. And the way it has all fallen into place, there's nothing random about this at all, And if you look at it, it begins from, I've spoken about this before, macrocosmic questions. And it proceeds to increasing details of microcosmic elements, thus covering both, the universal level particulars and the particles. So very scientific. This Upanishad is very scientific. Again, as I was saying, the philosophy, the first 3 questions, if you like, I'm going to tell you what the 6 questions relate to, and then before I go into each question. So the first 3 questions are, profoundly metaphysical in their character, and, they don't contain any sort of defined or philosophical responses, right? I think it's more to do with mythology and symbolisms, real metaphysical stuff. The first 3 questions. The 4th question, in contrast to the first 3, is completely embedded in philosophy, right? And the last 2 questions discuss Om and Moksha or Mukti, or the concepts of Om and Moksha / Mukti, okay? So it kind of flows in a consistent way. And that's why, the Prashna Upanishad has always been noted for its structure and its sociological and metaphysical insights into the education process of educating people, not into circular knowledge, but into knowledge of the self. Hence, as I said, the central focus is know thyself, right? So because of the 6 questions, this Upanishad is also called or known as Shat Prashna Upanishad. Shat means 6, Prashna means question. So the Upanishad with 6 questions, Shat Prashna Upanishad. So if you see Shat Prashna Upanishad anywhere, it's talking about this very same Upanishad. And I say it sits in the Brahmana section in the Atharvana-veda, right? Particularly a Brahmana called the Gopatha Brahmana. It is so named because of the form of questions and answers, it sort of, it makes you or induces you or influences you to think deep and to focus on what really is the answer. If this is the answer, then what is the justification for this answer? If that is the justification of this answer, how do you draw a balance? So it's a deeper and deeper inquiry. And so much has been said about this that it is also coming into the Mundaka Upanishad, which is what we'll look at next week, right? Hence the lineage of my choice of what I want to do first, second, third, fourth, so that there is a flow of consistency throughout, right? And then the Mundaka Upanishad will lead to the Mandukya Upanishad, right? And then the Shvetashvara Upanishad, and then finally we look at the Brahmanubhava, right? Anyway, so if you look at the Mundaka, next week I'll go deeper into it. It says knowledge or Vidya is of two types. One that is, absolutely transcendental and worldly, right? And of course, the other is one is absolutely transcendental, the other is worldly. Remember, I always say karma kanda and jnana kanda, right? And the knowledge that is world related is based on two types, right? Law of action and law of worship. Action is karma, worship is upasana. So then the Mundaka, develops and expands on that. And we'll look at that next week, right? So the questions are asked in a way in which it makes the, students wanting to know something, regardless of whether they will have the capacity to understand the answer or the response. So what used to happen in those days, it doesn't happen as much now, but in the early days, there used to be a lot of ethics involved in the transmission of education, at least in the ancient schools, in the ancient gurukulas, right? And if you look at the Prashna Upanishad, the beginning, right, the opening verses will talk to you about the type of students who arrive at a school. Yeah, I'm talking about a gurukula, seeking the knowledge from a master, or usually rishis are the one who would manage gurukulas, right? And the knowledge they want to is, I want to seek the knowledge about realizing the ultimate Brahman. Realizing the ultimate Brahman, that means the ultimate reality and the ultimate self. And so with regards to this particular rishi, and when the students went to him and they asked him to explain this concept or this knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, he does not give them the answer. But he says, before I can give you the answer, I need to see if you are really convicted, if you're really convicted, if you're really committed, and if you're really dependent on these answers. So for me to say, okay, you must stay with me and you must live with me ethically for at least 12 to 15 months before I will give you the answers. So ethical living was a precondition to getting knowledge. And that's the point. So what does this show? What is required before knowledge? What is required before knowledge is acquired? That's the question. Right? So this preface is significant, right? As it reflects the Vedic era. Belief that a student's nature, mind must first show that kind of, commitment, that conviction, that aspiration, that inspiration that they need. And of course, moral purity, before knowledge is given, and then they have the capacity to then share that knowledge. Secondly, for them to accept the answer as making sense, as the answer, they need to live with the master and serve the master, right? Hence the practice of the Gurukulas, right? It's not like these days where, the lecturer, and I can relate this to myself because I, as you know, I lecture in some of the universities here. So I don't know who they are, but there I am giving knowledge without knowing what sort of commitment, what sort of aspiration, what sort of dependency they will have on the answers, right? And particularly in the last year or so with the pandemic, right? And everything was online, and I didn't even see people. I had maybe about 60, 70 students, and I couldn't see a single one of them because none of them had turned their cameras on. So who was I talking to? Who was I giving this knowledge? And how do I know that the knowledge given has been received? So going back to the ancient times, before the rishis or the gurus actually give that knowledge, whether they are Veda Guru or Bodha Guru or Nishiddha Guru or Vishiddha Guru, right? Or Kamya Guru or Karana Guru, the 8 types of Guru. I've spoken about this during the Guru Purnima time, right? They will actually ask you to serve them for a year. Not serve means, not in complete servitude from a slavery point of view, but, to serve the master, Guru Seva Bina Nirvana Nahi. There's a beautiful bhajan, isn't it? Hari Bhajana Bina Sukha Shanti Nahi. And one of the lines there, Guru Seva Bina Nirvana Nahi. So when you serve the Guru, that is the greatest, heaven you can experience. Because when the Guru blesses you with the knowledge that can take you to his level or even beyond his level, then you will experience heaven itself, and hence the meaning. So there are 3 things that from an ethical perspective that the Prashna Upanishad says is required, is necessary before students acquire the status of being rightfully entitled to that knowledge. So what are the 3 things or the 3 ethical precepts that is required? Number 1 is tapasya, austerity, perseverance, fervor, that one. Second is brahmacharya, right? Chastity, self-discipline. And the third is shraddha, faith, purity, calmness of mind. And this, throughout that 1 year, their work is staying there and they are, reading, learning, and serving the master. They will acquire these 3 ethical precepts. And with that, they are then fit to get the knowledge of what the Guru is prepared to give. Because the Guru always says, seekers must meet the Guru with sincere heart. And that is what they must offer at the feet, right? And a sincere heart cannot exist without a sincere mind. Hence, Swami's first bhajan, Manasa Bhajare Guru Charanam. Charanam, right? Charanam is different from Sharanam. Sha and Cha have a different meaning, right? Charanam is the feet. Sharanam is the act of surrendering. So, Sharanam at the Charanam is what Swami was talking about. So, what do you surrender at the feet? Manasa Bhajare Guru Charanam, right? That means surrender your manas, your mind. So, what if I surrender my mind? Dustara bhavasagara taranam. Then I will take you across this ocean of samsara because you surrendered your mind. Therefore, you've given me the ability to think and direct you on your behalf, right? That is why, even though Krishna was God in the Mahabharata, right? He never told Arjuna, I am going to be your Parthasarathi. He asks Arjuna for the permission. Will you let me be your Parthasarathi? In fact, he gave both of them the choice, right? He called Duryodhana and Arjuna, right? And he says, either you can have my crores of army, right? Krishna army is known for their valor and their bravery, right? Or you can have me. I promise not to take up arms, but I will just drive your chariot. And Duryodhana was so afraid that Arjuna will choose the army, which means he gets a Krishna, which is useless because Krishna is just going to drive him around, right? So Krishna was actually in a position, in a sleeping position. He was lying down and he, we say asleep, but the divine never sleeps. We pretend to. And when these two guys entered his chambers, Duryodhana went and sat right beside his head. And Arjuna went and sat right beside his feet. Because Duryodhana was thinking, when Krishna opens his eyes, he'll look at me first, because I'm sitting right beside him. And of course, because he rushed to that spot, Arjuna couldn't get that spot, but Arjuna was quite content sitting at the feet of Lord Krishna, And of course, when you sit at the feet, automatically, the Gurukula experience comes and you start to massage the feet, right? Of course, Duryodhana looked at him mockingly. And when Krishna opened his eyes, he said, Partha, you are here. He first looked at Arjuna. Then he said, oh, Duryodhana, you are also here. Okay, good. Now, he says, initially when he called them, he says, this is, whoever I see first, I will give them the first choice of answering my question, right? Or my proposal, accepting my proposal, whatever. So he asked Arjuna. Arjuna said, Duryodhana is my elder brother, so let him go first. He was so happy. He said, I will take your 16 million army, And then Krishna asks him, Arjuna, are you happy for me to be your Partha Sarathi? Partha is he, Sarathi is the charioteer. So do you accept, are you happy for me to be your Partha Sarathi, but know that I will never take up any arms? He said, yeah. So you see, the Guru will always ask the Bhakta or the Shishya for whatever it is they want to give, they have to give with a sincere heart, with a sincere mind. That offering has to become pure, right? That is why they say, what bhajan do you want to offer to Swami? Not what song do you want to sing for Swami, What bhajans are you offering? That offering has to come from a pure heart and a calm mind. So Parabrahman and Aparabrahman. Parabrahman relates to transcendental knowledge and Aparabrahman relates to the worldly knowledge. So one will take you through Karma Kanda process. That is the Aparabrahman. So you might be exposed to some aspects of Aparabrahman, but Aparabrahman is only limited to what the world or people in the world can see, whereas Parabrahman is the world itself, the universe itself. So the choice is yours, Whilst Parabrahman can make you realize the actual aim or goal of the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, whereas Aparabrahman can only give you that. But the realization, you don't have. So again, birth, again, death, until you get to the point where I have this, but what is my realization of having this? Instead of just focusing on, I want this, I have this. Okay, next I want that, I have that. Next I want that, I have that. Apara means continuously you're going round and round, right? So when these students approached Pipalada Maharishi, he said, you are seeking something called Anveshana. Anveshana means you are seeking, you're all seekers. So in order for me to decide whether you are fit to receive the knowledge, you have to surrender your heart, surrender your mind and work, to achieve this knowledge or to get this knowledge or to acquire this knowledge. So students were usually kept for about 12 to 15 months under observation and given various tests, various tasks before they are, now the time is right for you to ask questions, before they are given that stature. So a year later, the first set of students who went to, Rishi Pipalada's ashram, they worked for a year. After 12, 13 months, the sage one day called them. Rishi Pipalada calls them and he says, okay, you may ask questions now. I think you've earned the right to ask the questions and I know that some of you will use the answers to further reveal yourself to yourself. So the first, I'll tell you who asked, who are the students who asked the 6 questions, right? So the first question was, when's a living being created? When are living beings created? So when is life created? So Rishi Pipalara says, when Prajapati did tapasya, Prajapati is the son of Brahma, right? And from Prajapati, the entire human race emanated, right? He created 2 things as a result of his tapasya. One is Riya, which is matter or which is feminine in character. And the other is Prana, which is spirit, which is masculine in character. Riya, matter, feminine, and Prana, which is spirit and masculine. And together, when these energies merge, he said life is created. Life can come in many forms, It can come as a tree, it can come as a bird, it can come as a lion, it can come as an elephant, it can come as a manusha, as a human being, He says just like, Chandrama manaso jataha chaksho suryo vachayataha. The sun is the spirit and the moon is the matter. In the same way, the Prashna Upanishad says, the sun gives you some form of energy and the moon gives you some other form of energy. But Aditya, the sun, works on the basis of 2 paths. And again, I've spoken about this when I did Ramayana, when I did Mahabharata, right? The northern direction and the southern direction, right? Uttarayana and Dakshinayana, northern and southern. Right? And of course, the story of Bhishma in Mahabharata, who was waiting for Uttarayana to come. So on that day of Uttarayana, those who are seeking to follow, knowledge of the worldly will go through Dakshinayana, southern part, or follow the southern cycle. Whereas those who are seeking the knowledge of the self and the knowledge of the higher realities will take the path of the Uttarayana, right? Following Brahmacharya, Tapasya, and Shraddha. Right? And Bhishma was all 3, right? And so he had the boon that he could choose the time of death, and he chose the time of death when the sun changes and is moving northwards, right? And that's why you have Bhishma Ekadashi. Bhishma Ekadashi is the 16th day when he gave the Vishnu Sahasranama to Arjuna and for promulgation to people of the world. So Uttarayana and Dakshinayana, right? This is Prajapati, how he has, managed the creation. And that, many times you would have seen, he talks about the sun, because the sun is the spirit of creation, right? Light, Tejas, Agni, fire, right? Tejas. Anyway, so many times you would have seen the sun being, iconified as, of course, there's this picture of Surya Narayana, which is the god, the sun god, and he is riding a chariot with 7 horses. Actually, it's not really 7 horses. The chariot has 7 wheels and each wheel has 6 spokes, right? But artists also give you 7 horses. Again, there are several interpretations of this, but the 7 horses represent the 7 worlds, right? Bhuloka, Bhuvaloka, Suvaloka, Mahaloka, Tapaloka, Janaloka, and Brahmaloka, Satyaloka, right? Now, what about the wheels? What do the 7 wheels represent as far as the sun is concerned? Because the sun, if it's a chariot, means it's on a journey, right? So what does the 7 wheels represent? The 7 wheels represent the half years, the seasons, the months, the half months, the days, the nights, and the muhurtas. And if you look at the sankalpas, whenever these sankalpas are read in a temple before a puja, they will mention all this, Dakshina, Yane, Merohe, all these 7 items are mentioned in the sankalpa. So what about the 6 spokes then? 6 spokes. See, Pipalada is giving the answer to the question, how is life created? And he's talking about the sun, about the 7 horses, about the 7 wheels, each one with a significance, and about the 6 spokes in each of the 7 wheels. And the 6 spokes represent Sathya, Brahmacharya. Sathya means truth, Brahmacharya means chastity, Tapasya, austerity. Then you have Anrita. Anrita means, falsity, lying, all those things. But what it actually means is the absence of Anrita, absence of Jihma. Jihma is what? Jihma is moral crookedness, the lack of ethics. And of course, the final one is absence of Maya. So, Sathya, Brahmacharya, Tapasya, absence of Anrita, absence of Jihma, and absence of Maya. These are the 6 spokes. He said life is created to go through the half years, the seasons, the months, the half months. Half months means half dark phase, half bright phase. This is where the moon comes in. So you can see how the sun and the moon play a role in the life. Universally, they are playing a role. Also, when life is created, they are also playing a role. That 7 wheels represent half years, seasons, muhurtas, month, half month, days and nights, 7. And the 6 spokes, Sathya, Brahmacharya, Tapasya, absence of Anrita, absence of Jihma, and absence of Maya, right? So that was the first question he answered. This is how life is created, right? The matter, feminine aspect, the spirit, masculine aspect, the sun and the moon, right? The energy is what is created as the seed, which then grows. Okay, very good. Students were happy with the response. Then the second question, this is the second Prashna, right? That's the first one. What is a living being? And then, what is a living being is the overall question. But the questions were in 3. How many devas, gods or deities or powers, uphold a living being? Interesting question. How many manifest their powers thus, and who is the best? So 3 questions, 3 questions, and 3 questions. So the question is significant because it explicitly expresses the fact that God is residing in every living being and in nature, right? And that's why I said to you, I don't know, last week or the week before, seek to understand the universe and see yourself vibrating within the vibrations of the universe and slowly try to merge so that the vibration is one vibration, and that is called the universal vibration, which is the Om Kara. Kara, Ukara, Makara. I'll come back to Om later. So Shankara says, Shankara says, Manusha Deva Rupena. That means he's saying man is made in the image of God. So God lives in man, right? But when he has given man the choice of choosing, has given the man the choice of choosing, man usually and most commonly makes the wrong choice through, sensory organs and capabilities and abilities and, the thought process, the speech process and the action process. Given you a choice, I said, don't do, but then you do. So you have you're now accumulating karma for all those do's, and don'ts. So he says, interesting questions. I will give you an answer to this, right? He says, okay, you want to know what is a living being and which God, controls. He says, gods, what you call gods. Now, of course, he's not talking about Sadguna Brahma. God is in the form of Vishnu or Shiva or Rama or Krishna or whatever, you perceive God to be. He's talking about gods as the 5 gross elements, the 5 senses, the 5 senses of organ, the organs of action as the expression of the deities. He said, these are the deities. These are your deities. You say 21 ohms, right? And I've explained why you say 21 ohms. right? So 5 gross elements, 5 senses, Panchendriyas, Karma Indriyas, or sometimes known as Jnana Indriyas, Panchabhutas and Panchakoshas is 20. And then one is Manas, mind. He said, this is verily the gods that are living within you. Then who is the best among them? 21. Who is the 21st? Your mind. So your mind is your greatest god, said Pipalara Rishi. Right? The deities manifest their power through these senses, the 5 gross elements, the 5 senses, the 5 organic, sense of organs, sense of perception, and of course the 5 koshas. And all this, puts something into the mind or takes something out of the mind, depends, right? So who is the most powerful deity that you have, right? Your mind. Then the next question comes. That's why I said to you, they're not arranged at random, right? First, the question of when is life created? Then second, who controls this life? Then the third question now, third prashna is, what is the nature of man and how is it so? Right? The third prashna of the Upanishad actually gave rise to 6 questions. The first one was 1 question. The second one gave rise to 3 questions. The third one gave rise to 6 questions, right? The 6 questions are, when is life born, right? When it is born, how does it come into a body, right? The third one, when it is inside the body, where does it abide? How does it abide? And then the fourth and the most important one, I'm going to focus on the fourth one. How does it go out of the body? Right? The fifth one is, how does life interface its relation with nature and senses? How does life interface its relation with nature and senses? And then the sixth one is, how does life interface with the self? So the fourth, fifth, and sixth is connected, because when the prana goes out of your body, the last breath, as it were, that verily determines the next life. Now come back to that, right? So Pipalara says, life enters the body when the mind is ready. When the mind decides to create another life, or when 2 minds, are vibrating at the same level of procreation, then of course it starts at the mind. And then physically things happen, and of course life is there. He says, it's like once that has, commenced in the mind, it's like a king. The mind then becomes the king, just like the king in an army, he commands his ministers, in his government to do his biddings. Likewise, the mind will also do the same to the rest of the faculties, right? So the first place is where the mind, life is created in that mind. And then, of course, life enters the body. And then, the connection between the baby or the new life and the existing life, or the carrier, is the umbilical cord, right? And that's why you see Brahma is coming outside Narayana's navel, right? Sitting on a lotus. And this goes back to Prashna Upanishad. Anyway, interestingly, Prashna Upanishad in the third question, the third prashna, and verse 10 in this third question, or the third chapter, if you like, it says, Yat chittaste naisa pranamayati pranastejasa yuktaha sahatmana yathasam kalpitam lokam nayati. What does this mean? Yat chittaste, chitta, naisa pranamayati pranastejasa yuktaha sahatmana yathasam kalpitam lokam nayati. Basically, this is a Mahavakya. It is a supreme statement, right? None other than Shankara has exactly said that. It states the inviolable truth. Inviolable truth. And I want you to listen to this very carefully, right? At the hour of death, at the minute of death, at the second of death, the most predominant thought in the mind becomes the basis for the new birth. It governs the parameters like the place of birth, who's the parents, what sort of resources you will have in your life, happiness, sadness, and all the further evolution. That is what this verse means. Yat-chittaste naisa pranamayati pranastejasa yuktaha sahatmana yathasam kalpitam lokam nayati. And Shankara says, whatever you are thinking about at your time of death, that becomes your next life. So who decides, who determines? You. You. Based on your karmic debts, what you've lived throughout your life, and obviously what you're thinking. That's why in the olden days, they used to say, at least in your olden age, think of God, do meditation, prayers, kirtana, this, that, everything. So if you were to go and you're mentioning the God of name, then, that becomes a parallel to where you're going to go next. And that is one of the reasons why they call, children were named after gods. Hey, Krishna, Rama, come here, children. Hey, Durga, Saraswati, come. Father is going to go. So at the time when you call the names, you are actually saying something that is, related. But of course, the mind must be there. So the mind, that's why this is a Mahavakya. So you now know, as a result of Prashna Upanishad, as a result of the third question asked by this particular student, whose name I will reveal towards the end, what determines the next stage or your next birth? Right? It is the last thought before your prana leaves. Prana, Udhana, Samana, Vyana, Brahmana. Right? These are the 5 vital air forces. And this is how they give the Naivedya in the temples. When they're saying, Om Apana Yaswaha, Udana Yaswaha, Vyana Yaswaha, Samana Yaswaha, Brahmane Swaha. You feed. And this is the same way, it exits through Udana. Okay. So, what is the nature of man? How is it so? The Upanishads, it's a fantastic science, right? Here, for example, and doctors may agree or may disagree, but this is what the Upanishad says, right? It says the body, and I think I made mention of this when I started, in the second week with Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It asserts, for example, the human body, right? The entire human body has got many arteries, veins and capillaries and things like that. It says, it talks about the heart. This Prashna Upanishad is talking about the heart. Now, you see, the science is going into biology here. He says the heart is the principal organ of the self, because the heart is where God resides. Prana, Tabish, when you go and put God in a temple, it's called Prana Pradishtabhanaha. But when you install God in your heart, it's called Hridaya Pradishtabhanaha. Prana Pradishtabhanaha means prana is what? Life breath, isn't it? Hridaya Prana Pradishtabhanaha means you are installing God in your heart. So the Prashna Upanishad says in this chapter, the third, with regards to the third, it says, from the heart, 101 arteries come out, and each one then divides into a further 100, and they then subdivide into 72,000, going from head to toe, right? Giving you a total of something like, 727,200, small, large, minor arteries that diffuse, air throughout the body, and of course, pump blood. I mean, look at the, specific science of numbers there, right? Doctors, as I said, may be able to confirm or even challenge this, but this is exactly what is stated there in the Upanishads, right? So it is life breath. It is this life breath which interfaces, because one of the question was, how does it interface with the self organs? So that one air goes through, in the heart, from the heart. It's like the headquarters sending to all the branches, And it talks about 7 lights through which this prana survives. 7 lights, lights here means 7 sources or 7, points. Let's put it as points. Now, what are the 7 points? It's all in your face. Your 2 eyes, your 2 ears, your 2 nostrils, and your mouth. 7, right? So the prana, whether you take it through sight, sound, right, or breath, it's through these 7 lights. Again, the 7 is significant because of the, Surya Chandra connection, right? So 2 eyes, 2 nose, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Oh, see, this is how it happens. Okay. Then the 4th Prashna. 4th Prashna is, the first 3 of the Upanishad focus on cause and effect, the transient, or if you like, the empirical or the manifested world. The 4th one, the 4th, 5th, and 6th focus on the nature of the self, which is unchanging. I said, independent of cause, proof, and is self-evident. So the 4th question raises 5 other questions. What sleeps in man? What sleeps in man? If you ask me, I'll say intelligence sleeps, unless you wake it up, right? What is awake therein when he sleeps, right? Then I will tell you Maya, but I'll tell you what answers Pippalada has given, right? Which Deva in man can see the dreams of man? Fantastic questions, What is it in man that experiences happiness? And the 5th question is, what is the foundation of all this? So the 4th question gave rise to 5 different questions, right? And of course, Rishi, being the Rishi who sees everything, was giving the answers. He says, like the rays of the sun, it shines brightly, full of effulgence. And when the time is right for the sun to set, all the rays, go back to the disk. They withdraw back to the disk, and this being the sun, right? And then next morning they start and they disperse again. And then they start and they go back. And they start and they go back. Of course, when they go back, it doesn't end. It doesn't mean the sun is not there. It's there. But who comes out prominently? The moon, right? So the sun and the moon are both present in man as your sensory organs, as your sense of perception, your organic senses, as the koshas. And of course, who is the highest? One of the questions was, who is the deity that can see the dreams, even when man is asleep? And of course, the highest deva is called Manasa Deva, God of the mind, the deity that is controlling your mind, right? And the mind is moved by what? Of course, I've spoken about this before in one of the Upanishads where I spoke about the 3 stages of dream, deep sleep and completely senseless. So dream is a form of enjoyment for the mind. It's what we call rebooting, reconfiguration, that experience is what happens during when the mind is going into a dream stage, then sleep stage, and then of course the deep sleep stage, right? So the dream stage is where it is going through its experiences of the day and perhaps, reliving those experiences. That's why I say rebooting, reconfiguration, right? Your computer doesn't work, you want to restart it, you do this, right? So it looks at what was true, Sathya, what was, not true, Asatya, Sathya and Asatya. And then, of course, in the dream, the mind beholds everything, isn't it? In a deep sleep state, impressions and the mind too sleeps without impressions. So the dreaming stage is all the impressions. And then the sleep stage is the eradication of these impressions. And then the deep sleep is where the mind is in a complete state of relaxation. And that is when your body experiences happiness, sukha, or bliss, ananda. Okay. And ananda has got 7 levels of ananda, Brahmananda is the final one, right? You start with the basis called Indra-ananda, and then you work your way up. So when the mind is in deep sleep, everything goes back to its source. So all matters and elements of matter return to their source. Water and elements of water return to their source. Light and elements of light return back to their source. Eye and whatever is visible to the eye goes back to its source. Ear and whatever is audible to your ear goes back to the source. Smell and the objects of smell goes back to the source. Taste and the objects of taste goes back to the source. Touch and the objects of touch also goes back to the source. Speech and the objects of speech goes back to the deep sleep I'm talking about, right? So everything goes back and reconfigures and reboots itself and is ready for a fresh start. Of course, that depends on how calm your mind is or how disturbed your mind is, right? Feet and what is movable, wherever you've been, that goes back, backtracks. Hand and what is sizable, what is measurable, that goes back. Mind and the objects of the mind, that goes back. Thought and the objects of thought, that goes back. Reason and the objects of reason, that goes back. Self-consciousness and the objects of self-consciousness, that goes back. Insight and the objects of illumination, that goes back. Life force and the objects of life force, that also goes back. So you're completely rebooted and ready for the next day. That is what happens, or that is what should happen every time you go into deep sleep. Because it is he who beholds, touches, hears, smells, tastes, perceives, thinks, reasons, conceives, acts, behaves. That is the essence of knowledge. And that is what will lead you from outer self to inner self. From inner self to the supreme indestructible self, which is the universe itself. Right? And the Prashna says, Viparara says in this, happiness and bliss is not external. It is internal. So if you go outside looking for something that is inside of you, you'll never find it. Because it doesn't have a postcode. So what should you do? You should go quiet. Silence the external sound and awaken the internal sound of your soul so that you can relate to it. That is the spiritual state of truth, beauty and goodness, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. And that is the Atman. So as long as with all this noise outside, you'll never find it. You have to go quiet. And that is why in his 9-point code of conduct, he says daily meditation and praise. In that time, you only hear these things. Even then, there comes a point when that has to also quieten down and the mind has to be left to its own devices with nothing to fall back on. That's where the control of the mind starts. Which brings us to the 5th question, which is, why do we need to meditate? What is meditation? So the 5th section opens with the question, if a human being sincerely meditated on the symbol Om until his death, or even at the point of death, what would he obtain by it? Well, if you're meditating on the Om, then my question will be, at which part of Om are you meditating? Are you meditating? See, there are 3 levels. 3 levels. Are you meditating at the A level, Akara level, or are you meditating at the U level? That means you've mastered Akara and now you're in Ukara. So A and U. Or are you meditating at the 3rd level of supremacy? Makara, Akara, Ukara, Makara. So you mastered Akara, you mastered Ukara, now you're going at Makara level. So where are you in that meditation journey? Deep, it's very deep. And I told you before, I don't know at which point, I told you to look at the Narayana Upanishad, where it tells you the process of meditation and how you can see, the Narayanic force in meditation itself, right? There are three levels of Atmajnana with regards to the recitation of Om and the meditation of Om, recitation and meditation of Om, right? The A level, the Om is A-U-M, right? Akara, Ukara, Makara, right? This can translate into multiple interpretations of the three Devis, the three Murtis, the three Kalas, right? The three Gunas, the past, the present, the future, conscious, subconscious, superconscious, body, mind, spirit. So it can translate into a lot of things. That is why the Akara is at one level, the lowest level, right? This, if you are meditating at the Akara level at your time of death, it gives you a quick rebirth. There is no transit, waiting time, waiting room. No, straight away, and you'll have some ethical strengths. And consequently, you can become great. This is what Prashna says, right? If at the time of death, you are meditating on this Akara level, A. But what if I am going further? Yeah, I've already mastered Akara. Now I'm going into Ukara. So at my time of death, I was at the U level, having mastered A, Ukara level meditation. Then, well, that is intermediate, beginner, intermediate, and of course, what do you call expert or professional. So the intermediate level of self-knowledge is akin to meditating on two letters, that A and the U, right? So if A can just give you a quick rebirth with some ethical, moral values, then what will A and U give you, right? It will give you the ability to enjoy the heavenly life. But because you get so attached to that enjoyment value, you are always reborn into the world of man. That is Akara, Ukara. Then how do we, get out of this cycle? Yeah, that means you must go to Akara, master it, then you go to Ukara, master it, then go to Makara and master it. When you are at that level of, vibration, your last thought is on the meditation of Makara, where you see yourself no different from anything, anyone, anywhere, anytime. That is the time where you get full self-knowledge. That is the time where you have mastered A, U, and M. Now you are no longer going to be reborn as man. You go straight into Devaloka, where they will test you. And then before you go and reach Brahma. That's why I think I mentioned to you some of the Devalokas, the Devas themselves are continuously, recycling in the Devaloka because they have not still mastered, that connection between Jivatma and Paramatma. So there is still some illusion there, right? So the Prashna actually symbolically talks about these three states of knowledge, right? Being awake, dream sleep, deep sleep, right? This in the science of Patanjali Yoga Sutras, it's called Tara, Mandra, and Madhyama, right? Tara is what we call the awake. And then Madhyama is the dream sleep stage, and Mandra is the deep sleep stage, right? The three levels. So if you want to know how to transcend life and not be born again, the fifth Prashna of the Prashna Upanishad gives you the answer by telling you, meditate on A, U, and M. Akara, Ukara, Makara. Aum. When you say the your teeth should clatter. Your mouth should be closed. Your teeth should be clattering. That vibration should go upwards and hit the Sahasrara Chakra. When it hits, you will know because you will be transported elsewhere, right? So saying it and bringing it, the energy, this is chakra meditation, right? Bringing it from the base, from the Mooladhara, where you awaken the Kundalini, and then, bringing up to the second, the third, Swadhisthana, Anahata, all of that, one, the Vishuddha, Ajna, and Sahasrara. You're gone, or transported already. So that answer led to the sixth question. What is immortal in man? That was the sixth Prashna, sixth question, right? And of course, the Rishi looks, this question was actually asked by a prince who was passing through the ashrama. He saw the students and he called one of them. And, in the course of conversation, he says, where can I find someone who will tell me who will explain to me who a Shodasa is? Shodasa. Shodasa means one with 16 qualities or 16 characteristics, 16 parts, if you like, right? Because that would be, anyone who possesses that would be immortal, right? So the student says, I don't know. And of course, they were, being taught ethics, isn't it? So the ethics is one should not answer any question when they don't know the answer. And one should not try and wing their way around the question and give an answer just for the sake of giving an answer, which is what the modern students do, by the way, right? Even if they don't know, they will come up with something and they will say all kinds of things, but that's not an answer. It's an attempt to fool the teacher by saying, oh, you asked me a question, I can answer. But those days, you see, the students were so truthful. So when the prince asked the student, he said, I don't know this, and I cannot answer if I don't know something, but I know the guru will be able to answer. So he took the prince to the guru, and the guru answered. He said, the only one who was born with the 16 qualities and who was blessed with immortality, from birth, which he himself didn't know, right, was Rama. And I don't know, those of you who followed me when I was doing Ramayana, I spoke about Rama and his 16 qualities, right? Shodasa guna, 16 qualities. And I said, Rama was also known as Shodasa, right? Shodasa gunavasa, one who has 16 qualities. And you see the Prashna Upanishad makes a reference to that. It's one who has these 16 qualities is one who can realize his true self. And truly, when Kaladeva came and told Rama who he really is, that's when he walked into the river Sarayu and became Narayana again. That was the end of the 7th avatar, right? So Pippalada continues and he says, all rivers join the sea. When they join the sea, are they still called rivers? No, they lose that form and they take on the new form, which is the merging with the greater thing, right? They become an ocean. So when you take, when you take a tumbler or something and you scoop some water from the ocean or the sea, do you know which part was the river and which part was the sea? No. The river becomes the sea becomes the ocean, right? Or the ocean itself. So too, the supreme soul or self remains. The journey of the Jivatma is going. Finally, when it merges with the Paramatma, you cannot say, this was this Jivatma, that was that Jivatma. You will only see one total effulgent light. That is the Parabrahma. And you cannot say, I was this flicker. You see that corner, that flickering there, that is me. No. Like I always say, if you burn a matchstick, right? And you take that burning matchstick and put it into the flame of a candle, can you distinguish between the two lights through the flames? No. You can't. It's just impossible. And that is the true nature of the self, which the outer self should try and link up with the inner self. And Pippalada then says, this is all that I know. And this is all that I need to know in order for me to move to the next stage. Because all I need to understand is the never-changing absolute reality and the ever-changing man reality. So I must move from the ever-changing man's reality to the never-changing absolute reality. And this is what Prashna Upanishad is all about. Now, I told you the 6 people, right? They were all great. The students of Pippalada were actually children of rishis who were themselves great, but they always send, even though they were great, the teaching has to be done by another guru. Ethical practice. So the first Prashna was asked by Sukesha, Rishi Sukesha, and I've spoken about Sukesha, who was the son of Bharatvaja, right? The second was asked by Satyakama. Satyakama is the son of Sibi Rishi, or Rishi Sibi. The third question was asked by Sauryayani, grandson of Surya, born in the family of Garga, Rishi Garga, Gargya, in other words. The fourth was asked by Kaushalya. Kaushalya was the son of Ashvala, who became the Ashvala Rishi. The fifth question was asked was Bhargava. Bhargava was, sage Bhrigu's, in the lineage of sage Bhrigu. He was a Bhrigu descendant. Bhrigu was a very famous and very powerful Rishi. And the sixth question was asked by Kabandi. Kabandi, or otherwise known as Katyayana, who was a descendant of Katya, or the Rishi Katya's line. So these six were put specifically at that time, at that place, in front of Pipalada Maharishi to ask these questions, and for the Rishi Pipalada to give that answer, so that that becomes the basis of learning and the spreading of that knowledge which we have today, or which we have the gift of today. And that is Prashna Upanishad. Prashna means question. Now, how many times you have questioned, for example, your own, your own sense of, why am I here? What is it that I am here to do? What is my role? I'm a father, I'm a brother, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a friend. Is that all my role? Is that the extent of my livelihood as far as life is concerned? Or is there something more that I need to do? Anyada sharanam nasti tvameva sharanam mamaha tasmat karunya bhavena raksha raksha. Saishvaraha. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sai Ram.